we're saying goodnight, sweet prince, as we officially lay the Pac-12 conference to rest. It goes out with a bang, though.
Yeah, I think the lesson that we learned, right, is it wasn't necessarily a problem of, talent on the field in the Pac-12. I think a lot of it was a talent of getting or a problem of getting their product in front of enough viewers to make it marketable in modern college football. And, it is ironic that the best season the conference has had in probably a decade, it ends up being their last one after everything had happened. But yeah, everything that I saw on the field this fall in the Pac-12 just really made me kind of weep for what we could have had, right? That this could have been a conference that really invested and put itself out there and been innovative and, mirrored the programs that they have and the way that they've been innovative in talent acquisition and coaching and offensive scheme. Tons of innovators out in that conference, but unfortunately, there were no innovators in the actual office of the conference, and they just got caught left behind. And now we have to mourn the loss of a historically great conference and everything, all the change that comes with that.
Garrett, is USC UCLA fell flat on their faces in their final season of the Pac-12. Were you more surprised about that, or more surprised that Washington was able to, kind of become the cream of the crop with a team like Utah? We didn't even mention them in that little run that is lurking there as well.
Well, guys, it's so interesting because when you looked at what you expected last offseason, the first big news that broke was that USC and UCLA were heading out.
Yeah.
And they were like, whoa, those are the big brands. It's crazy. It's going to implode the whole thing. Washington and Oregon were the afterthought to the Big Ten. Now, as they enter, a lot of people thinking Oregon might actually win the Big Ten Conference next year. Washington obviously just appeared in the national championship game. And by the way, USC and UCLA didn't really factor into very much of college football this year. So, it's maybe a little bit backwards on that. Flip side, you just mentioned Utah. I'm also thinking a team like Arizona, both of them heading off to the Big 12. You have these massive, teams that have been playing well, producing well, and by the way, have been garnering eyeballs. I looked this up just now while we were, doing the segment. Guys, the Pac-12 was tied for second in terms of appearances on a major network in at a prime spot.
Wow.
They were tied with the Big Ten. SEC had 33. Big Ten and Pac-12 both had 22. The ACC had 11 and the Big 12 6. That's blowing my mind because the entire narrative last offseason was just that the Pac-12 can't get eyeballs. Nobody's watching. Who's going to actually share the revenue? What, network would find? Apparently, networks wanted to broadcast these games. Apparently, people wanted to show their games. They had the teams. They had the competitive football, but they couldn't find a way to put a deal together. The absolute failure of the conference to put a deal together, to put their teams in front of, their audience, I think will go down as one of the worst mistakes in the history of college football. We've lost the Pac-12, not because they're not good teams, not because nobody wants to watch them, not because it's in a late viewing slot, because the conference couldn't figure it out. The conference didn't know how to put a deal together. Maybe they thought of themselves as something they weren't. Maybe they, overestimated something about themselves, or maybe they just underestimated it and they were like, nobody's really going to do it. We'll never pay that deal off or whatever. But still, they weren't willing to take a shot on them. Maybe it's shame on ESPN for not giving him a deal. Maybe it's shame on Fox for not giving him a deal. But it's probably shame on the Pac-12 for not finding a way to keep everyone together. Because this conference would be a lot of fun next year to watch as you're watching, Washington and Oregon run it back, as you're watching Arizona try to run it back, as you're watching Utah try to go back up there, USC with a new quarterback and trying to, kind of rebuild that with a better defense. There'd be so many interesting Pac-12 storylines. And by the way, if you were still a conference, you might have kept DeBoer up in Washington if you felt that he still had a direct path to the playoff. So maybe Washington stays together as a program if that's the case too. There's too much to speculate about here. It just sucks that we lost the conference.
Tell me if this is an off-base take. I feel like this is like the Titanic all over again, right? The Conference of Champions,
100%.
Successful. There's no way the Pac-12 is gonna. Yeah, there's no way the Pac-12 is gonna fall apart, right? And then all of a sudden, you have poor management at the top. Someone falls asleep at the wheel, and we've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast. But Garrett, I think you're right. This could be an example historically in business classes of
Mhm.
how you don't manage an organization because you objectively took one of the most successful conferences ever in sports history, successful organizations in world sports history, and you ran it aground because you misjudged so many business factors, so many market indicators leading up to this, to where you almost had the national champion of the biggest sport in America that was going to be without a conference, outside of your conference going into next season. Like that is continues to blow my mind the more we think about it.
See, Mitch, your Titanic comparison's close, but it's like if the Titanic crashed in the iceberg, everyone hit the lifeboats, they start to, panic, but then heroically somebody musters the troops, they put the whole ship back together, then they circle around and hit the iceberg again. Like that's exactly what your comparison is like for the Pac-12. It's just such a poor, poor, poor effort and product from the conference office and what they're able to do. Just shameful that we're going to lose Pac-12 after dark
Yeah.
and the entire thing that we've been doing here with the Pac-12 with the fun stuff on the West Coast and these elite match. I mean, it just sucks. Like we're losing
Yeah.
something really special, and it could have been avoided. Like it really could have been avoided.
And yeah, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the last 8-ish years of Pac-12 football were, must-watch TV like this year was, because there were some problems, right? There were years where there were no true national contenders, and that certainly
Sure.
hurt. That certainly hurt the marketability of the conference. But why does Coca-Cola hire marketing people? Why do you get Coca-Cola ads, even though that brand is, recognizable all around the world? It's so they can stay on top and stay in front of people's minds. And they did nothing to keep us at the forefront of their minds. It was hard to access their games legally, right? It was hard to, get on the Pac-12 network. Not a lot of people carried it nationwide. So just awful, awful business deals all around. And yeah, I love your analogy of the Titanic. I also think you're right, Mitch, that it's going to end up in sports business or maybe even regular business textbooks one day, how this all went down and how they just failed as the conference office.
Yeah, I think there are many lessons to be learned from this.
Gracious, how